Gene Valentino's Grassroots podcast. He tells the truth. He tries to get information out there to make sure people make good, informed decisions.
The one we're featuring this week is Luis Sanchez from the Cigar Shop. He owns a company called La Tradicion Cubana. The Cigar Shop, Miami, Florida, since 1995. This Luis is really one heck of a guy. He's determined to manufacture cigars based on an unprecedented excellence in quality using old-fashioned Cuban methods. You can get this to become part of your branding experiment. I'm using this with my guests on the Grassroots Truthcasts. This could be your brand on your product, your service, anywhere in the world. Look for Luis Sanchez at thecubanshop.com.
Good morning for the Southern Pine Electric Weather Center. Here is your latest local forecast. 67 light rain at Noble Field in Laurel. Looks like 70. Braiding. I say that. I don't mean that. We are marking the anniversary because there's no celebration to be had about Katrina. I can tell you from personal experience, it was something that I will never forget. We have a couple of guests this morning. We have Major General Larry Harrington, who was in charge of the National Guard during Hurricane Katrina recovery. And we have from Pensacola, Florida, we have former Escambia County Commissioner Gene Valentino. And so I'd like to welcome both of you guys back in and a good morning to you. Ted's also with us as usual. Ted and I are here every morning. But Ted, we wanted to talk to these guys about some of the things that they experienced during this thing. What did you see, General Harrington? What was the one thing that you saw? I remember what it was for me, and I told you earlier. But what was the one thing that you saw that you said, "Oh my God, what are we doing here? What has happened?"
Yeah. Before, let me say that I wasn't in charge of the National Guard. I was in charge of a task force, which was called Task Force Engineer later.
Same difference.
Well, I had about a third of the forces, which are about almost 12,000 National Guard soldiers involved with this. But I was very proud to represent and lead those formations. But the one thing that stood out to me, and I'd almost have to break it down, Michael, into phases. The preparation. Of course, as a leader, you're going and looking at what plans you have available, matching it against resources. How do you get into a communication mode where you can get into a critical thinking process? So those sort of things up front, I can remember saying, I'm not getting situation awareness. There's no communications. We don't know really what's going on here. So that's when I broke out and with vehicles and even on foot and helicopter, tried to get that assessment that was so critical so that you could, respond. And I just remember thinking, oh boy, we're in trouble here because we couldn't get that situational awareness. We did not have the communications. I couldn't move the things that we needed to move in terms of equipment and personnel and subsistence in the forms of MREs, ice, water, and those sort of things. That was the first thing that hit me, was the magnitude of what this was going to be in terms of response.
Communication is important. And I remember very vividly, nobody's cell phones worked. The cell towers had all gone underwater. We couldn't communicate with each other. We would have to send messages through people to other people the old way. The old-fashioned way was the only way to get a message out. And so as a leader of a group of men, that many people, you had to be really concerned that I can't communicate. How do you set those communications up? I mean, you do this during wars. How do you do it during a hurricane?
Well, you approach it very much like in war. You have redundancy built in. It's a basic, communications through a series of meetings and staff meetings and so forth, the voice communication face-to-face. And then it moves quickly into the electronic communications to include radio. And I'm talking about, site-to-site type radio, your military radios that have the security devices and so forth. And that's what we ended up using and trying to set up, relay towers along the coast and getting straight lines of communication so that our radios worked. A little side note of that is that a lot of my units had just returned from Iraq, and in Iraq that we'd gotten. I'll just say we got kind of lazy because we were using cell phones to communicate with, and they had lost the skill set of setting up FM radio and being able to talk across, talk across those channels. So it was a challenge there, and certainly we didn't have. Like I did in Afghanistan, where you had drones and had other types of satellite communication and that sort of thing. So
Right.
I had to resort to, just like the Roman legionnaires, where you set times where subordinate commanders or staff would come and report and give situational awareness reports.
Yeah, that had to be tough, I know. But I have this one story that I wanted to tell, and it just hit me when you were talking. There was no communication. The phones didn't work. The push button phones, and everybody had a phone in their home back then. A lot of people don't now because of the advent of cell phones. But I was across the way at a neighbor's house. We swam out of our house and went to our neighbor's house who did not go underwater. And he had an old rotary dial phone that would work. It actually worked. If you dialed out on the rotary phone, you could get it to work. But none of the push button phones work with the tones. That was all down. That was the craziest thing. The oldest form of communication that we had, the rotary dial phone.
He became very popular, didn't he? He became popular.
That's the only thing that worked.
Oh, yeah.
That's crazy.
Well, it was a real challenge, and it concerned me because, again, we couldn't get into the critical thinking and decision-making that an organization responding to any emergency needs to get into. Situational awareness was so important.
Yeah, it is. Gene, I'm going to bring you in here for a minute, and you were at a distance, and you were watching, and you saw what was going on. What was your first take about this storm and what you saw from the Pensacola area?
Well, we had just recovered from Hurricane Ivan over here, which was a Category 5. At first blush, I thought, well, it's not as bad. It's only a Category 3. But let me tell you, that's a very misleading issue. Poor folks in Mississippi, Louisiana, and Alabama, Category 3 or not, it prolonged itself and hovered over the whole Gulf Coast area there, which is where the damage occurred. I think it was around 1,800 people had passed away. It was truly a disaster. I mean, compare that to the 1,200 people that were just murdered 2 years ago by Hamas in Israel. I mean, this is really a major crisis, and the billions of dollars of damage. It caused people to wake up, and I think preparedness and response that the general was talking about exposed serious weaknesses in the disaster responses, both at the state and local and federal levels. We've learned a lot, and we've grown since then, and we certainly are more accustomed to reciprocating with each other in terms of resources. You're never totally prepared for one of these things. So the question is, how are you leading? How are you bringing your best foot forward? 1 million people were displaced, and some of them ended up over here in Pensacola. School system percentage attendances jumped almost 8 to 10% right after Katrina, from the whole region coming eastbound our way to the Panhandle.
Yeah, it was funny, but I remember, a lot of the folks from New Orleans went to Houston, and a lot of people just stayed. Many people. I remember people leaving the coast and coming to Hattiesburg. Ted, there were so many people in Hattiesburg that were from the coast. In fact, to this day, I still run into people who decided to make a life here in the Pine Belt because they lost everything on the coast. I mean, did you notice that, Ted?
Oh, very much so. And, in that 20 years plus since then, take cities like Lucedale, Wiggins, Picayune, Poplarville, they have grown dramatically just because people left there. Now, Hattiesburg, during Katrina, power started going off on Sunday night into Monday morning. The radio station went off the air. We had a generator at the transmitter site, but we didn't have power at the station. But through a miracle of God or the people at Southern Pine Electric, they got us back on by that early evening on Monday night, and we were probably one of 5 radio stations in South Mississippi that was still on the air. And, you know, we were trying to tell people in Harrisburg to do, everything was shut down. There was no power around the city except a few little people, I guess, from the Southern Pine area. And they went out on the limb to get us back on the air because we needed communication. And so we immediately started telling people what to do. The one thing I'll tell you real quickly that came out of this that was good, you got to know your neighbors. And everybody became friendly, and the guy down the street would come up and say, hey, there's some gas over in 49 at such and such, or, you know, I've got a gas grill here. We're going to cook out tonight. We're going to clean out the freezer. And so the community came together and tried, but the next day it was like mushrooms growing up after a storm. By Tuesday morning, there were trucks parked all on the side of the road selling generators and chainsaws from Indiana. They just came down, you know, like a locust down here at a very inflated price too, by the way.
Yeah, that's not the time to buy a generator after a storm. It's before the storm. Hey, Gene, you don't buy generators after a storm, do you?
Well, I'd hate to wire it up with a flood up to your knees, I'll tell you.
Well, a lot of people lost their generators during Katrina because they went underwater. I had a friend that lived right on the beach, and his home was obviously gutted, and his generator was completely worthless after that. So, you know, I guess it really doesn't matter. If you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, you can possibly lose everything. General, let's get back to what you were faced with here in South Mississippi and the Gulf Coast. You know, there were lots of looters that showed up, and you know, I've often wondered I was in the military, but obviously I was never deployed anywhere inside the continental United States to do something. What were your troops advised, and how do you handle the looting situation?
Well, you know, first of all, this has to be in close coordination with law enforcement. We did 3,000 what we call presence control patrols, literally just going through neighborhoods, having a presence, pretty much like what you're seeing in D.C. And of course, from a commander's standpoint, you know, I have confidence in my soldiers as far as being trained to be warriors in combat. Sometimes in law enforcement, you don't want to walk around with the presence of, you know, AR weapons around your shoulder looking like you're ready to, to return fire. You know what I'm saying? But so we had to balance that but there were 600 and something arrests in the first few days of that event that I was aware of. And looting was a problem. It wasn't as big of a problem as what I've read in other places. It's one of the great things, and Gene alluded to it, is really the population. And I'm a firm believer now that a population has to have an ability to survive these sort of things through a series of what I call informal contracts. Basically, for 96 hours, you're going to realize that nobody's going to come save you. Yeah. And you need to have the provisions and the capability to survive 96 hours so that the ones that really need you, you know, will get those resources. But back to the law enforcement, we did have that as part of our mission, but it was, I stressed the emphasis for my soldiers to work very closely with local law enforcement officials. And I think the presence certainly prevented a lot of that. But generally speaking, we had civilians in this state that asked the question. And what I found in emergency situations, that the human nature, there's 2 types of people. There's the ones that ask what, and there's the ones that ask why. And the ones that ask why it's kind of reactive. Why did this happen? Why did it happen to me? And that, you know, that transforms real quickly into, why aren't you helping me first? Why? Yeah. And then there's the ones that ask what? You know, what do I need to do to survive? What do I need to do to ensure my family survives, my community to survive? Very proactive, to where you see citizens becoming soldiers and soldiers becoming citizens in a way that benefits the community.
We had chainsaws. We had tractors. I saw a tractor coming down my street, and it was somebody who lived up the road that was with his bucket of his tractor. He was pushing debris that from an apartment complex that was on the beach that had washed up the road. And, he was pushing that stuff out of the way to get down toward where we were. And so, you had so many people, and that's the what people. What can I do? Let me get out here with my chainsaw and start clearing the road up. Let me get out here with my tractor and start pushing this stuff out of the way so we can get emergency vehicles in. And so for days, and you're not kidding when you say you better be prepared for at least 3 days of nobody getting to you, because it was about that long. But I'll tell you this, General, one of the greatest sights that I ever saw, me and my middle son were walking down on the beach just looking around, and there was a helicopter flying by. It was a Coast Guard helicopter. That helicopter, forgive me, landed on the beach and gave us MREs.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was so appreciative of that, and I'll never forget it.
We flew 400 sorties a day, and we would move them to pre-designated distribution points. And I had taken my equipment that we moved our dozers and large equipment on to clear roads, and we would actually load those low beds, if you know what a low bed is, and we'd load those things with ice, water, and MREs, and kind of go through these neighborhoods like an ice cream man, and everybody would come out. It was emotional, Michael, just like you expressed. It's very emotional.
It comes back to you. You just remember it like it was yesterday. It was such a tough time for all of us. And my son had stepped on a nail, and he was bleeding. And here comes the Coast Guard guys, and I was just, I can't tell you how thankful I was for them just to stop to land that helicopter and give us food. I mean, it was. God bless the Coast Guard is all I can say.
And it's, what I call, and there's actually a formal kind of an organization now that teaches this 96-hour, and it's preservation, you may say. And it seems to be formalized now. I spoke to them years ago, but how does a community survive either natural or man-made disasters? What is the citizenry's responsibility? And I hope we've learned that as an individual, we have a responsibility not only to ourselves, but to the community to take care of ourselves, to be able to take care of ourselves so that the real emergencies can be, administered or to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my home was gutted. I had nothing. We were sleeping outside. Mosquitoes were eating us up. It was the worst experience of my life. And just the little comfort that you get from folks in the military and folks like the Coast Guard that helped us out. And then later, some of your I'm sure you were commanding some of these guys that brought us MREs later. They were just driving up and down the road in our neighborhoods.
That was my folks doing that. And, we had, and there were hero, Josh Russell, who was a soldier of ours, and he was in the 890th Engineer Battalion, and that Sunday broke to go help an elderly, and you may remember he was killed in an accident. Those are the kind of heroes that come to mind as we're sitting here talking. That I had 400 soldiers that their houses were either destroyed or damaged and needed repair, and they were in formation that next morning. That Sunday morning, they were in formation, ready to go help others. Just tremendous.
Yeah. Thank God for those guys and for you for doing what you did for us, because we really needed help. I mean, this was not, folks. I'm not a person that will, go out and ask for help, and I didn't have to. Thankfully, we had folks like you that were coming in and helping us. But that was just an amazing time in my life. I lost so much. But yet, you're right. You have this sense of survival, or at least I did.
Resiliency is what it is.
I was surviving. I knew I had to survive whatever it took. And then slowly, but surely, the cavalry came and they started helping us. And, power was coming back on. And life kind of went back kind of to normal, except for the fact that, you know, we were living in a FEMA trailer for a while after the storm, while the house was being reconstructed. But it was a difficult time, and that's just my story. Let me tell you something. I didn't have it nearly as bad as some people. There were people that were literally trapped in their homes. There were people that died. And so, you know, I'm thankful that I made it through. And hey, let me tell you this, General, and I'll tell you too, Gene. If y'all ever catch me near the beach on the Gulf Coast and a hurricane's on the way, I want you to knock me in the head and drag me out of there.
I'll jump in real quick, guys, as we go to news at the bottom of the hour. This is the difference in Mississippi and the city of New Orleans. They just panicked, did nothing, went to the Superdome and lived in crap, and let the national news complain about what's going on. Mississippi pulled up their socks and went to work and did something. And people like General Harrington.
What versus why?
Yeah. It's the bottom of the hour, 7:30. We'll take a quick break. We've got Major General retired Larry Harrington. We've got Gene Valentino, Michael Paul, and yours truly. We're back in a moment. 34, and here's Michael with our weather.
The one we're featuring this week is Luis Sanchez from the Cigar Shop. He owns a company called La Tradición Cubana. The Cigar Shop, Miami, Florida, since 1995. This Luis is really one heck of a guy. He's determined to manufacture cigars based on an unprecedented excellence in quality using old-fashioned Cuban methods. You can get this to become part of your branding experiment. I'm using this with my guests on the Grassroots Truthcasts. This could be your brand on your product, your service, anywhere in the world. Look for Luis Sanchez at thecubanshop.com.
Good morning from the Southern Pine Electric Weather Center. Here is your latest local forecast. Looks like 67 at Noble Field and Laurel, 70 at Bobby Chain Airport here in Hattiesburg. We've got some rain throughout the area here in the Pine Belt and pretty much all over the southern part of the state. An 80% chance we'll see that today, mostly cloudy. Your high near 80 degrees. Tonight, a 60% chance of showers, mostly cloudy, 69. Saturday, partly sunny with a high of 83, a 70% chance of showers tomorrow. And looks like Saturday night that drops to a 30% and mostly cloudy with a low down to 68. Sunday, a 70% chance of showers, 83 for your high under partly cloudy skies. And for Labor Day, it looks like it's going to be a pretty nice day, partly sunny, 84 for your high, and about a 40% chance of afternoon showers and thunderstorms. Across the state right now, temperature-wise, I have not updated these, so these are a little bit old. 60 in Tupelo, 67 in Jackson, 71 in Natchez, and 73 in Biloxi. Our city of the day today, Burnsville, Minnesota. Looks like they have partly cloudy skies there, 63 degrees. That's your weather from the Southern Pine Electric Weather Center. You know, General and Gene's going to have to leave in just a few minutes. I wanted to get something else with him, but I was reminded on a text from a friend who's listening this morning who said that if you got those MREs and you had peanut butter or the pumpkin cake in it, you hit the jackpot. and I laughed. And you know, it reminded me, those meals were so good and they were so delicious because I was so hungry, and they're so filling and they give you so much energy. I never had MREs. I was a C-ration guy from back in the day. But I had them during Katrina, and I wanted to point out that about a year later, I had some left over, and we broke them out and we started eating them. They weren't near as good when I wasn't hungry, and which reminded me of what my grandmother used to always say: "There's nothing that makes a meal taste any better than hunger."
Well, and you know, the MREs were the freeze-dried, a lot of freeze-dried substance in there, where the old other C rations was cans, if you remember. But
yeah, do I remember? I still got my P38 on my can.
There you go. And you know, the freeze dried. I was always amazed at how creative people could come with this freeze dried. You know, they could take freeze dried peaches and crunch it up with the crackers and make a peach cobbler that would certainly rival it. Right. So, yeah,
you got to give it to those military guys, man. They can come up with some great stuff. But, you know, which reminds me of what General Patton always said. I love this saying. He said, "Tell a man what to do. Don't tell him how to do it. He'll amaze you with his ingenuity." Gene, one last thing. I was going to talk to you about the help we received, and the state of Florida was very, very good to us. They said, I remember seeing Florida state troopers working intersections in Ocean Springs. I didn't recall seeing any Escambia County Sheriff's Department, but you were telling me as we were texting that you guys did send a bunch of folks over here.
Yeah, all the way over to New Orleans. We had all the way over to New Orleans. We had some of the sheriff Ron McNesby at the time over here in Escambia County had mobilized a few different efforts. One was supply, and the other was response, as you said, the traffic control, and some law enforcement. There was regrettably some of the lessons we learned from these disasters is that there are some wrongdoers that will take advantage of pilfering and stealing and stuff like that. And we assisted in some of that within the Biloxi and Hattiesburg area. We also brought over a whole bunch of generators, and I think they were supportive to some of the mustering areas that were set up around the state. And we did a part, I'd say a small part.
Like that. For ice and all the different things they went away.
Yeah, but it was a good thing to be part of, and I was glad we were.
Okay, General, go ahead.
No, I was just going to point out that a lot of that wasn't from that nefarious activity was not from locals. People traveled many, many miles to come and do bad things in this area during that time, just like they do in any other emergency. But they were taking advantage of a bad situation, and they came far from long distances to do it.
A few days, I remember, you made me remember something. A few days after when we were able to get out and to be able to move around a little bit, they were starting to get the streets cleared. You had National Guard guys that were around all of the major neighborhoods and street intersections. And those guys would make you show your ID that you actually lived in the area before they would let you in there. I love that.
Yeah, exactly. And again, it goes back to that. I talked about presence control. The military has a sense of comfort for folks that are distressed. And, there's a sense of security when they're doing just exactly what you talked about. That was one of the techniques we used.
Yeah, they would, and they got to know you. The same guys would be there, and they would say, "Okay, man, come on."
Yep.
It was great. It was great. It was like having your own personal security. Those guys were, and they had those M16s over their shoulder. They sure did. All right. So, Ted,
well,
we've talked a lot about the Gulf Coast, and of course here in Hattiesburg, there was no power. And see, let me tell you what. For a few weeks, I went and stayed. We stayed at our farm, which is in Beaumont. We didn't have power in the beginning, but we did finally get power. But even after we got power, we didn't have water for a while. It was miserable, but at least we could sleep in the air conditioning and didn't have to worry about the mosquitoes. What was the power situation in the Hattiesburg area, and how did that work out?
Well, it was up to 7 days or more before everyone got power back here. It took a pretty good while. I remember, and we've had them on the air before, our friends from Mississippi Power Company, were on that day that Katrina hit, the president of Mississippi Power Company made the statement, "Today I do not have a single customer." And that's in the whole Mississippi. Think about Mississippi Power was up to Meridian.
Yeah.
And up down the coast and all of South Mississippi said, "Today I do not have a single customer," including himself. And that was just absolutely horrible. I guess that's the hardest thing up here was to get adjusted to no power. And then it sounds selfish almost, but no air conditioning. About the third or fourth night, you start to get a little freaky when it is just blazing hot.
It is not selfish to want air conditioning in South Mississippi. When it goes out, we all lose our minds. We call the air conditioning guy, and we will pay him anything to come get it fixed.
Well, this radio station, I told you we got power within 24 hours from Southern Pine. Thank God for their good service and their realization that the station needed to be on the air. But we became like Motel 6. I mean, you'd try to be on there talking about it, and somebody's sleeping in the corner on the floor over there.
Well, you're not only hungry for food, you're hungry for information and guidance. So this, being able to come on back on the air and talk to folks was very comforting, I'm sure.
But you know what? The people responded and religions responded. Virtually every religion, if you're Pentecostal, if you're Catholic, or you're Protestant, or whatever you might be, they had groups that came into town offering relief and helping with food and with chainsaws and clear it up and all. And no money was charged for this. Now, you had these other people, all of a sudden you saw so-and-so's tree service from Iowa, and he's in a truck going up down the street and charging exorbitant rate to cut a tree off your house. But
want cash.
Yeah, want cash. You have to make a deal. They were everywhere. But the religious organizations, and we had account after account on the air says, put me something on the air, tell them that I'm willing to help. And do, and that's, if there's any good that came out of this, the community that came together, I hope we never have to face it again. But I was pretty impressive with the response of the people here. And I think our deep old Southern religion and good old boy neighborhood, fact that we grew up that way and our mom or daddy or grandmama would slap us if we didn't act right.
What's the song, Country Boy Will Survive?
That's exactly right.
I tell a story about I'd set up a mini distribution in my backyard in Lake Serene. My wife and my two boys had come back home to be with their mom, and they lived rather large in the backyard, camped out around a fire, and I'd send some MREs up, and they would distribute those into the Lake Serene community, and everybody gathered around the fire in the evening, and someone would come up with a dish that they had created under those conditions. And, I don't want to use fond memories, but Rosa tells me, my wife tells me, they got to know their neighbors in a way they wouldn't have under any other circumstances.
Yeah, it brought the communities together. You're so correct. It's funny. You got to know, I can tell you the same exact scenario happened in my neighborhood. There were people that were, do you need this? Do you need that? I mean, people were, just helping each other out. And there were some in our neighborhood that didn't get flooded. And, but many of us did. There was an apartment complex between me and the beach, and that apartment complex just was totally destroyed. And all of the wood from that apartment complex was surrounding my house. And the neighbor I was telling you about with the tractor, he came over there and worked. I mean, that guy, he was such a dream. Pushed all that stuff out of the way of my house so we could get in and out, no problem. And that's just the kind of folks that we had, at least in our part of the world, that really helped and really got to work. I mean, you can't stop. You have to go to work. You have to get your life back straight. And the sooner you go to work and get everything going, the quicker your life is going to get back to normal.
And that was one of the critical, after the communications and we were able to establish, became very apparent that survival, we were literally concerned with starvation, disease control. I can remember in Pearlington when I visited there and saw, a community that depended on septic tanks, but the little small sewer system had ruptured. I was worried about a cholera outbreak because everybody's sleeping on this saturated ground.
Right.
And so, talking about subsistence, though, there was 1.2 million MREs distributed, over 1 million gallons of water, 2 million pound of ice. These were the sort of things that came directly from the response from military and FEMA and all the emergency response organizations that had those plans in place.
I'll tell you something real quickly. The one thing I remember about this was Friday night prior to Monday, I was in Biloxi broadcasting the Hattiesburg-Biloxi football game, and Biloxi was dedicating a new stadium. They called it their casino stadium because casino money had built it. It had suites. It was the nicest high school stadium I've ever been in. And no one mentioned, what are you going to do about the hurricane? They were telling me where to get the best po' boy on the coast was. Right. Friday night before, I guess people just didn't expect it to the last minute.
I love this conversation we're having because it brings back some good and not so good memories. But talking about football, the Army band was assigned to my command periodically during the course of this. And Base St. Louis was wanting to play football and bring the community, improve their morale and everybody. So they went to see what it was going to take to have a football game. Remember this first part of September after the storm, and their band hall had been destroyed. The field was in bad, so we assisted, and the leader of the band or the Army went and talked to the band leader, and they came up with a plan. The military band learned the fight song of Bay High, and they played that fight song when that team came on the field that Friday night after the storm. And I'm telling you, there was not a dry eye either side of that field. It was a really moving and emotional, football in South Mississippi in particular. What that means, it's on its own, much less in those conditions.
It's great to get back into the swing of things, and that probably made people feel a lot better. General Gene has got a question for you. Sure. Gene, go ahead.
Hi, General. One of the concerns I have is, what do we learn from these events? I know after every event we do a self-assessment on the good points, the preparation, the response technique, what you thought you were prioritizing versus what you should have prioritized. Is there any reflection you have about what you did versus what you could have done? Are you pleased with what you did?
What a great question. And I think you need to break that question down. In my mind, I break it down and I talked about from an individual level. It goes back to that word resiliency. And I would like to see a movement, not only at the individual level, where these informal agreements between community and community officials, civic leaders, and the individuals, what is it I need to do from a personal level? And I talked about that, to being able to survive for 96 hours on your own, whatever that is, water and foods and so forth, and shelter. But from a community level, what is a resilient community? Does it mean simple things like underground utilities, to where utility lines are not ruptured in a way that it interferes with the well-being of the community? Is it the transportation and those transportation routes? You guys remember Highway 90 was a series of concrete pads that were pushed up and sunk and destroyed. Bridges were gone and so forth. So it goes back to taking lessons learned. This is my opinion, taking lessons learned, incorporated in a community plan that everybody understands their responsibilities, from the individual level to the organization, which includes the municipalities and their governances that and within those municipalities. In other words, cities have responsibilities for sustainment and resiliency for so many hours. And we can reach that level. There's a comfort that we can, withstand any kind of man-made or natural disaster. And I don't say better for it, but better prepared for sure.
Yeah, General, was your responsibility and oversight covering any of the New Orleans area as well?
Well, we were in coordination only. And, I was telling Gene during the break that, we were prepared for a small hurricane and got a large one. And in Louisiana, I got a large hurricane and a flood.
Yeah.
And there's a whole different set of circumstances when you have communities saturated in 8-10 foot of water for 2 weeks or more, and the after effects of that, just not being able to get to people and that are trapped on top of roofs and that sort of thing. So there was a different event over there. We were in close coordination because of what they call the EMAC agreements, which is Emergency Management Agreement compacts between states. So there was a great deal of coordination taking place, and Northcom was involved with moving these MREs, these thousands of tons of MREs, and ice and water, and some of it was being directed and redirected to different places. So it was a coordination effort, and basically anything we can do to help, and they were the same. So,
go ahead, Gene.
Yeah, General. One of the things I find so interesting is that sometimes in these emergencies, these declared emergencies, I know what the county would do as a county commissioner. We'd kind of loosen our grip on certain things to allow more flexibility in the immediacy of the response. In terms of the immediacy of your response on the military side, were you open, or could you have been open to 3 or 4 guys sitting on the porch, anxious to do something to help didn't know who to talk to, what to do. Could you mobilize as the military citizens on the porch to come in and work at your side, or did you have some sort of assigned tasks for citizens next to the military?
Well, from the military side, I was pretty sensitive we had some specialized equipment and skills and training that is hard for the average citizen, just unless they've been there and done that, to kind of jump in formation and help. So what we would do is try to direct that through the emergency response centers. You have one in your county. You have a plan, where you're going to set it up and who's going to be involved. So what I would do is send a small cell of 5 soldiers, usually a field grade officer, to go in and be liaison to coordinate, help, and assist in any of the emergency responses that were being coordinated at the local level.
Any response is always great. You appreciate it. But, one of the problems we saw during Katrina is the response of people coming in, a group of people just coming in, and nobody knew where they were supposed to go, what they were supposed to do. They've come up with, and I took some of the classes, the training classes, to how this is actually supposed to work, who you report to, what, you come self-sufficient. If you come into a disaster area, you come self-sufficient. You've got enough food, water, what have you, sleeping capability for all the people that you bring to do that. And so a lot of times people think they're helping, General, and Gene, you can talk about this as well, when in fact they're kind of just getting in the way.
Well, there's, and I've observed since then, there's like the Cajun Navy is an offspring of some of these emergencies. And there's these Christian groups that have gotten very organized and very capable and kind of plug and play with some of this emergency response that we didn't have during the Katrina days. I think it's a result of that. Samaritan Purse, I think, is another one that Billy Graham group does. These are well organized that plan all year long for these events, and are they're very respondent, first of all, and they're very capable of helping. Again, I just emphasize that it has to be a coordinated effort, and it has to be communicated real well. And that is a task in itself. That's no small task in itself, is to ensure that the lines of communications are set. Everybody understands the priority, because Michael and Gene, you can probably attest, what's an emergency to me is not, may not be an emergency to you. You follow me?
You better.
I lost my Coke Zero. That's an emergency.
So one of the things that we have learned from Katrina, I guess, from listening to you guys, is that somebody, has to be in charge. There has to be a center of operations where you have people that are delegating the things, the different, like the groups that come in. Where can you go help? Would you agree with that? That's kind of something we learned.
Well put. Leave your ego. Leave that back where you came from. When you come, I use the term jump in formation, but that's what the formation's about. Literally, you fall in formation and take instructions, and then you're evaluated on how well you follow those instructions. And it's a big task for an emergency management center with all of the not only individual desires, but collective desires that are brought to the table there. Well, we need this and we need that. Who sets those priorities? And then honoring those decisions of those.
Whether you like it or not.
That's right.
Yeah. It is kind of hard sometimes. You've got typical folks that come in. Some of them are natural born leaders. They want to get involved, but you've got to have a structure, and you've got to have a way. And I've learned this during Katrina, and I think a lot of other folks did as well, that you must get a group together that has you call it headquarters, whatever you want to call it. And that's where everything has to come from. That's where meetings happen. That's where all the folks get together, talk about, what they saw yesterday, last night, all of those things, so that they can put the appropriate response in the appropriate places.
Exactly.
Yeah, complacency was probably the costliest part of the disaster. It's not optional. You must be prepared. The general said 92, 96 hours. When I was commissioner over here in Escambia, we used to say the first 72 is on you. And the general's
Love it.
right. It's probably 4 days now. That's you better have you better have preparation for it, not because of any negligence on the part of the response folks, but just sometimes the magnitude of these things makes it so difficult for response to reach the back hills of a given community.
You know, one of the things I would like to point out, all of us who experienced this, many of us were in leadership positions when Hurricane Katrina came through. We've got a lot of experience with this. General, we've got less than 45 seconds left. Are there new people coming up that will be able to handle these things that don't have the experience? I mean, we did it, but are they teaching this?
Oh, absolutely. And you know, there's other threats that scare me probably worse than some hurricanes. You know, you think about that. There's been enough world events here lately to be concerned. I spent a lot of time in the Middle East and spent time in Israel and spent time certainly in some of those great vacation spots of the Middle East, like Afghanistan, Djibouti, and different ones. But you know, again, I go back to the basics every time, and starts with my Christian faith, and you know, I really believe there's still maybe enough testosterone in this world, and particularly in our leadership organizations that will handle these things.
All right, General Larry Harrington, Gene Valentino, Ted Tibbett, Michael Paul here. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Remember today, if you can't do great things, do small things in a great way. We'll see you guys later. Thanks.
Enjoyed it.
Paid for by Christian Care Ministry.
You know, a lot of times you have to choose between something high quality or something that's...
Hey, that was great. That was great, Gene. You got some good questions in there. I appreciate that.
I hope it was helpful.
Yeah, no, this was great, man. This is this is the anniversary. 20 years ago. We were a lot younger.
Smart thing to highlight it. Very good of you.
Hey, thank you for joining me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, my best to everybody.
All right, bye.
Bye-bye. The one we're featuring this week is Luis Sanchez from the Cigar Shop. He owns a company called La Tradición Cubana. The Cigar Shop, Miami, Florida, since 1995. This Luis is really one heck of a guy. He's determined to manufacture cigars based on an unprecedented excellence in quality using old-fashioned Cuban methods. You can get this to become part of your branding experiment. I'm using this with my guests on the Grassroots Truthcasts. This could be your brand on your product, your service, anywhere in the world. Look for Luis Sanchez at thecubanshop.com.